Our first item is A-plus information. Mrs. Stephanie Grisham will present information about the A-plus program. Please come forward.
It was hard for me to always stand back here behind the podium because I'm always moving around. Now I could take it off, but I
You just take the mic with you.
just walk all over. All right, good evening.
Good evening.
This is my yearly report to you for the A-plus program. Just as a reminder, it is our scholarship program where students can receive tuition and fees to a community college or a vocational school after high school. And last year was kind of a big change for us because it shifted from DESE to the Missouri Department of Higher Ed, and so there's still kind of some, things getting hammered out with them, some decisions that they're kind of changing at higher ed level that are affecting students and stuff. So I'm actually going next week to Camden, and Lisa Schwani, the A-plus coordinator there, kind of gets a regional meeting together. She did it last semester and this semester because there was supposed to be some decisions being made, so we'll get a complete update actually from the people from the higher ed are going to be there. So eager to see what happens there next week. So just as a reminder of what components are made up of A-plus, students are required to do 6 or 7 things depending on which class that they're in because of, again, that shift from last year. There's a new component or an added requirement for our class of 2015 and below. Students have to first make sure that they're at an A-plus high school for 3 consecutive years. That's their last 3 years prior to graduation, and that's actually one of the pieces that's in question at this point. They're looking at what does it mean to actually be in that A-plus school for 3 consecutive years. Is that defined to be where they're in a seat in an A-plus high school for every single day for those 3 years? Or do we allow kind of a 2-week window at the beginning where, if they're enrolled within 2 weeks of our start date, is that allowable? And is that window okay to be at the beginning, middle, end of the school year? So there's actually a student that's that we're working with to try to get a question answered from them in that situation, and then that might affect her eligibility. So at this point, I actually talked to them today. A decision on that hasn't yet been finalized. They surveyed us, A-plus coordinators, in December for us to kind of put our input in. I personally think there should be kind of, a little bit of a window for those students that are transferring. Schools always start at a different time, and so to have that little bit of a leeway. Also, with this requirement, there's a military dependent exemption, so if any students are of dependent military active service men or women, then they are exempt from this requirement. So the other thing, students have to have a 2.5 GPA when they graduate. So on my desk currently, there are those students that are right there borderline, or unfortunately those students that won't be able to receive a 2.5 of our seniors this year. So I do have to break bad news to some of our kiddos. But I always try to encourage them that there's always, other funding besides A-plus out there. And so I encourage them that, I'll work with them if they need, extra help finding other funding besides A-plus. So 2.5 is like a C-plus average, and I actually went this week into one of our advisory classes at the high school because a group of sophomores in Mrs. Cantrell's advisory just didn't really know exactly what A-plus was. And I said, so tell me what you think A-plus is. What do you know about the A-plus program? And one student said, you have to be smart to be an A-plus. And I always love to have that response because that's such a misconception for A-plus. With the A-plus being in the name, and I get this at registration all the time, oh, I'm not smart enough for that. I'm like, oh, come over here. Let me, I always have their numbers for all students. Let's look at your GPA. And they're sitting with like a 2.87, and so they're above the 2.5 requirement already. And then they start thinking about it.
Stephanie, I've asked you this before. Is there any discussion of allowing a district to name it whatever they want to name it?
Not that I've heard of. I don't think that's come about.
I mean, there's got to be a lot of kids, maybe not as much now, but like you said, that just it turns them away because they think, oh, I got to have great grades to do that.
Yeah, I haven't heard that. So I think, me being proactive and making sure I explain to them, and say, hey, it's only a 2.5, which is like a C-plus average. So,
right.
And when I said that to those kids in that advisory, I saw some of those eyes, perk up. Oh, well.
It'd be interesting to know the history of how it ever got named that.
Yeah, I don't know. We have to go back and look. But So hopefully, we can encourage more kids to join because of that. I know there's a current senior this year that I asked him at registration. I said, "Oh, are you part of A+?" And he said, "No, I'm not. I don't think I have, the qualifications." I said, "Well, let's look." Well, he's slightly below the 2.5. And I said, "Well, what do you want to do after high school?" And he said, "Oh, I want to go to Lynn Tech, and I think it's heavy equipment operating that he wants to go into." And I said, "Hey, I can get that paid for you." And he's like, "Oh." So I really encouraged him, and I was on him first semester, and guess what? He signed up for second semester. We've got him in tutoring and stuff, so he's one of those kids I got to call down and say, "This is what you have to have second semester to get your 2.5. So we're in the middle doing all that as we speak. Also, we're getting ready to talk to those students that are below 95%. Again, those are our seniors that we're really focused on, but students for A+ have to have that 95% attendance when they graduate from grades 9 through 12. If it's below 95, they're allowed to do an appeal, which includes a 4-year attendance appeal, which sometimes can be trying for some parents to go back and get that documentation. So living and learning through years of experience, when students sign up, if they're already below the 95%, I give a courtesy call home to that parent and say, "Listen, we're not really worried too yet if they're a sophomore. They still have 2.5 years to increase their attendance, but just as a reminder, make sure you keep documentation at home. That way, when your child's a senior, you can go to that folder, pull it out, and then you don't have to go run all through town and get documentation." So I try to give that encouragement and advice to those parents so it'll help out later on just in case they need to do that. They also have to put 50 hours of unpaid tutoring in. That's kind of the work behind the program, but every time I do one of my required tutoring meetings, I tell them that, that's the work behind the program, but, you can put 50 hours in and get $10,000 to $15,000 worth paid for. So I think that's a small price to pay for what they're getting out of A+ if they actually use it as intended. Another shift from last year with the higher ed taking over, they included a 25% allowable number for hours for job shadowing. So which is 12.5, not 50, is the 25%. But we as a district, my advisory committee decided on 8 hours. They thought that was a good number. So the state says 25% is allowable, but you don't have to do the full 25%. The district can make a local decision as to how many that you include with that. So we decided 8 was a good number. That's kind of a normal work day. Not all students go out for 8 hours. Most are 6, 7. But they do have that opportunity to go out in the community and see careers that they're interested in. Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. I've had a student come back from a vet clinic. I said, "How'd it go?" She goes, "That is completely not what I want to do." So that's a good thing that they decide now that that's not what they want to do, as opposed to 6 years into vet school and paying all that money. So there's all kinds of possibility. I have kids that ride, around with the Rolla Police Department. I've sent them to the Highway Patrol. I've sent to, vet clinics, to teachers, in the elementary schools. One year I sent a student to the Springfield Cardinals for their athletic trainer, so I told them I'll stick my head out there, and the least they can say is no, and okay, thank you for your time, and we'll try something else. So we try to get them interested, to somewhere where they're interested in the career that they're looking at. So 8 of those hours can come from job shadowing. So they also have to maintain good citizenship at school and outside of school. Any drug or alcohol use is an automatic denial. That's state statutes. And then the FAFSA form, so our seniors are hopefully diligently trying to complete that FAFSA form. Has to be required by any college and stuff, but for us, the reason they have to show verification of the FAFSA form is that state will, or the community colleges or vocational school will use federal money first, and then they will end up picking up the balance with the state aid contract. So they use the Fed money first, and then they use state. So saves us a little bit in the state. And then the new requirement for class of 2015, so our current sophomores and freshmen and anyone thereafter, is the Algebra 1 EOC. And so this is kind of a new thing that I'm going to have to start tracking with those students. If students get the proficient or advanced, then they are eligible with A+. If they do not get the proficient or advanced, then they can retake that test. And the state has promised us that those retake scores would not go against our current scores for the district. So how that's all going to be hashed out behind the scenes, I don't know, but we'll see and make sure that that happens. So that's another question. That's one of the questions I'm going to ask
they all
again
can.
next week is, you know, definitely are those kids that have to retake that for A+ purposes, you know, is that getting ironed out a little bit so that that doesn't go against our scores. So also if they graduate still without having a proficient or advanced, then they can still go to a two-year community college or vocational school, but that first semester would be out of pocket for that student, which unfortunately for some families, you know, may hurt that student actually going. But once they obtain that 2.5 GPA that first semester, then A+ would kick in second semester. So hopefully that will help out some kids as well. So.
And when you say out of pocket, I mean, would they be able to use other financial aid
Yeah,
that they
if
could
they
obtain?
had other financial aid, yes, they could use that, and then,
Would the scholarship still cover 4 semesters after that?
it's actually
Or
now,
just-
I'm getting ready to talk about that, they've changed it from, it used to be the 6 semester, so actually 2 years worth of tuition, but now they call it the 105% rule of tuition reimbursement, in which it used to be for the college year, you know, you go fall, spring, summer, fall, spring, summer. So those were the 6 semesters that they were covered, and it was to be the consecutive semesters. Now they're calling it the 105% rule, where if you are required 60 hours in your degree program, A+ is going to pay for 63 hours. In which the reason they did that, they were seeing that they were paying for a lot of remedial classes that they felt at the college level these students should be college ready and not taking all these remedial classes. So they didn't want to pay for all those remedials as well as the other classes that they had to use for their degree program. So this kind of gets out of that. So if it takes them 69 hours to complete their degree program, then those extra 6 hours would have to be paid by them.
Is there a time limit on that? Is it still 2 years? Or can they go half-time?
No, I don't think it's in 2 years. I mean, they
Okay.
saw that 4-year window.
Okay.
Have to
And
be
so
12
it's that
hours to get
105
that.
versus,
Okay.
so,
Full-time student.
so, again, that's kind of the new stuff going on, with that, so. All right, so, me being math, I love numbers. I'm called the Data Diva Queen at the high school because of PBS. I do all the data for behavior events there as well. So currently we have about 461 students enrolled in A+. As of now, that's grades 9 through 12. That's actually like a 17% increase from when I saw you guys last year. So we are kind of increasing. Hopefully that word is getting out. Last year I did go into the junior high to talk to the 9th grade, actually the students that were in Algebra 1 classes. Because they were getting ready to take the Algebra 1 EOC, and I did a little, you know, spiel with them of, you know, making sure they do very well on this test, you know, not only for the district, but not only for themselves as well, but for A+ purposes. And so hopefully, you know, maybe me getting in and going through those classes has kind of sparked some interest. So planning on doing a little bit of that second semester as well. Last year we had 470 students enrolled, so this is just numbers from last year. And this was the first year that I saw that we actually hit the 10,000 mark of tutoring hours, which I was very happy to see. We were always up there around 9,000. Previous year was like 8,900. But last year our students put in, and that's for grades 9 through 12. That's just not our seniors. That's everybody who went into our district. So students benefited from 10,500 or 10.5 thousand hours of help from our students to our students within our district. So I say it every year, and I say it to my students when I do my tutoring meeting, you know, hopefully when you do your tutoring, it's not just because you have to put in 50 hours. I hope you get in there and you like it, and you take away those intrinsic rewards of helping students, and I always tell them that they never know when they can change the life of a child. They don't know what that child goes home to at night. They never know, you know, what's going on with that child outside of the atmosphere that they see them, and so if they can spark that interest in education, they never know what that's going to do to that child in the future. So I was happy to see the 10,000. Cumulative hours for 9 through 12, that's for everybody for all the years that they've done. We had 14,000 last year that were clocked. And then we had a 3.7 dropout rate, which I tried to over the summer work with Catherine Lau, also work with Kim Feeler. We do some calls home over the summer to those students that are on our list as dropouts and try to recover some of those students, try to encourage them to come back and re-enroll with us, or, you know, encourage them to get into a GED program if they're, you know, older that can't come back and complete by the time they're 21. But this was actually the first year also that I saw that was above the state average for us. So The state average was 3.2. We're at 3.7. So that's a concern that I have, that hopefully, maybe we can work with the counselors and stuff at the high school and see, what are things that we can kind of do to, make sure that those kids are here and not dropping out. So.
Those are A-plus kids who
No,
drop out of
that's actually
school?
our entire
Just, for the whole,
district.
okay, I
That's
see what
our
you're saying.
district
All right.
dropout. So anyway, we'll see on that. Hopefully we can get that down. And this is just for the graduating class last year. We had 123 grads, which was up from, I believe it was 116 last year. So we run around that mark. We never get, 150 or anything like that. But so last year's class actually was around 270, I think, that graduated. So actually that was a higher percentage of most classes. 53 said that they plan to use the funds, which I know seems kind of low sometimes. Actually, it was an increase from last year. We had 40 students that said they were going to use it. But I think, most students, obviously most students, are going to use A-plus as something that looks good on their college apps, their resumes, scholarship applications and stuff. And I always encourage that. But also, it's not just that they're not using it. It's also some of those students use it as a backup plan, because they do get 4 years to use A-plus. So the students that graduated last year, they have until 2016 to use A-plus funds if they need to. And there are some students that do fall back. They go for a year somewhere and then they come home and decide they want to, take classes at East Central and stuff. So a lot of those kids do use it as a backup plan, which is always good to have options. So that results in over $1 million that could come from those scholarships. I never can put an exact number on that, because obviously tuition at different places is different, and depending on who uses it and what, that's such a crazy number to actually grab a hold of from the state level, so they never ever give that to us. So that's just an approximation on my end. That senior class did 9,400 hours in tutoring total. They had a 3.29 GPA cumulative, which is well above the 2.5 required. They had a 96, almost 97% attendance average. They did 76.5 hours on average, versus obviously the requirement's 50, so most of them did well above what was required. 19 of those kids were recognized by you guys for 100 hours or more, and the highest was 335 hours. So Mrs.
Wow.
Hoffman is going to be missing her daughter, so that was by Haley Hoffman. She obviously did many, many hours over summer and during school and stuff with mom, so that was extraordinary. In November of this past November, November 1, I did my experts in the classroom. A-plus is also orientated, for kids to be focused on a career and where they would like to go after high school, whether it to be, directly into the workforce or going to a higher ed institution so they can get a degree in that. So I invite people in the community to come in and present on November 1. Students are offered to make 2 selections for 2 presentations. It's actually kind of piggybacked with the RTI and RTC career fair, where our sophomores come over to RTI and RTC, and so then we continue classes as normal, or do we do something else? So we've kind of piggybacked those to where the juniors and seniors rotate through 2 presentations for what we call the experts in the classroom. So sessions, there's different examples there. Our mortician was back this year, so it amazes me how many kids are interested in that. Some of the unknown stuff, but lots of different things. We had our firefighters back, and military personnel is always a hot one for those kids. Engineering was a hot topic this year for students as well. So lots of good things. Obviously, I hear some students, oh, why do I have to go to this? But if they have that open mind to go and just grab something from it, as to something new that they learn from it, or again, is it something that I really want to go into, or is that really turned me off of going into that field and maybe veered me to something else? So it's always good to give those students options. So there's a couple pictures. The bottom left is Missouri State West Plains. They always come and do a game type. Minute to Win It was their theme this year, where they were doing different games and giving them different facts about college and why you should go to college. Obviously, they're from MSU West Plains, but they don't. I've sat in a little bit of it before. They yes, want them to come to their university, but they're in it to encourage students to just get some degree, whether it be with them or some other institution. So they always come with us every year. So my goals this year, and what I've been kind of working on through this year, is again still educating students and parents of the new requirements. and also keeping myself abreast of what's happening at state level. Increase that enrollment, so we're seeing kind of an increase. I'm hoping one day to have that number at 500 within our district to be enrolled. And then also that job shadowing, trying to get out there and tell students. I've talked it within our advisories as well about encouraging students to come get a job shadowing application, because it's not only A+ students that can job shadow. We allow any Rolla High School student to job shadow one time a semester as an excused absence. So we treat it kind of like a school field trip, so it doesn't count against their attendance and stuff like that, to give them that opportunity. So I have
Great.
questions for myself.
Who's on your advisory council? You said you were on the advisory.
Yeah, we have teachers and people in the community, and I have students that are represented by that come in. We usually meet about once a month, and that's something I'll do in the spring. So.
Good.
Governor Nixon made some comments this week about proposing some new changes to the A+, but I heard no details. Are you aware of what he has in mind? Okay, okay. Are some four-year schools accept A+?
Yes.
Okay, is that number growing or stagnant?
It's pretty much stagnant. I mean, I've seen it kind of stagnant. Some have kind of fallen off, some have kind of added on. MU used to be on there as a transfer, where if they had like an AA or an AS, they would transfer it in and then they get some kind of compensation. The four-year universities don't obviously give the full tuition and fees. For instance, like Truman State does $1,000. Drury, I think, has $1,000 scholarship for A+. So they, of course, want to market those students to their university as well. So it just kind of depends on what the university is. And I have a list in the office, and I always tell students that, here's my list, but, we've updated it over the summer, but it's always changing. So I always recommend that they call that university and make sure. And I always say, even if the college isn't on my list, call them, and just ask somebody in the financial aid office and see if they give any type of scholarship for A+.
Okay.
So.
Well, I can do an ad for you. My daughter's using hers this year
Yeah.
at East Central, and she's taken 12 hours there last semester, and then another 4 at Drury here in town, and then is doing pretty much the same this semester. And it's a great benefit. I mean, and there's so many different places they can go. They don't have to stay at Rolla and go to East Central. They can go lots of places.
Yeah, we send a lot of students to OTC and Springfield. Lynn Tech is a hot one, with the technical schools.
Moberly has a campus that's also in Columbia, so so there's lots of opportunities, and most of those 2-year schools also have agreements with four-year schools where you take these classes, we'll accept them. So that idea that, well, if I go there, will that help me get into a 4-year school? Absolutely.
Ms. Grisham, at the parent meeting the other night, which I thought was really well attended, I mean, it was really nice. You mentioned that even students going to 4-year schools can use their A+ in the summer after they graduate.
Yes.
Since we've got people listening, could you explain that? Because I thought that was pretty interesting,
Yes.
how you can use that one summer.
If students, say for example, a student's going to MU or a student's going here in town to S&T, they are not technically a student of that university until their first day of classes in August. And so for A+, you have to be enrolled in that university full-time. So technically the summer after they graduate, they're not enrolled in a university yet until August. And so those students that are going to a 4-year university that does not accept A+, then the summer immediately after they graduate, they can use A+ for that summer. They still have to be full-time. For instance, if they stay here in town and do something at East Central, they have to have 6 hours, which is the full-time status for summer. The thing about it is they have to, summer is considered kind of the end of the college year, so that FAFSA form, instead of filling out the 13-14 FAFSA for the next school year, they would have to fill out the current school year of 12-13. So that gets kind of confusing, but once they fill it out once, I think it's just a click of a button on their website to do it for 12-13.
But if somebody's interested in doing that, they can certainly contact you at the high
most
school for,
definitely.
yeah.
Yes.
Because you could
It
get
worked
6
out.
hours. You could get 6 hours of credit, and as Jamie said, a lot of those 4-year schools will take those.
Sure.
Absolutely.
And I
through
always
articulation,
encourage
yeah.
that for students to make sure if they are doing either at the summer immediately following, or if they plan on maybe just using a year's worth, of A+, and then the second year after they graduate, enroll somewhere else, to make sure they always check those transfer of classes between colleges.
It's a great program.
It is. It's wonderful.
So
Thank
one day
you.
maybe we can call it Bulldog Plus. Get those few kids that
Local,
Well, if the GPA's 250.
Any other
why don't you
questions?
call it C++?
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Mrs. Grisham.
Whoa.